Hello everyone and welcome to another scrapbook layout process video. Today, as you can see what I've got in front of me, I'm going to be making a double page layout with the Hey Handsome paper pack. Now this one I'm also bringing in some mix-ins. So I've got the Hey Handsome paper here. This is actually a bulk piece which has the burlap or the denim on the other side. If you're a Close to My Heart consultant, we are able to order bulk packs that have the same designs in one pack. So this one has the icon on one side, the burlap on the other, and this is also the pattern that is included in the card making workshop kit for the Hey Handsome. So if you have that, you'll have the same patterns. So the other papers that I'm using today, I'm bringing in the mix-ins to go with this because I think they work quite well with this retro type paper here. I've got the harbour pattern. This has got a fine tick mark stripe all the way through it. The other side is actually a check. And I'm going to use this Papaya star pattern here. The other side of this has a more floral side to it. So you can choose if you're using something like Cosette, this would work quite well with that as it's those sort of tones, but it's quite versatile because the other side is a star print. I really do love the mix-ins. I love the tone-on-tone patterns and the fairly generic patterns that they have. So let's have a look at what I'm creating today. And I've brought in some elements that are from the Hey Handsome digital collection. These are SVG files, so you can use these if your cutting machine uses SVGs. I have a Cricut, but it will also work with a Brother and a Silhouette. So any machine that uses SVG files now, we can use with our digital art collections. It's not just constrained to using a Cricut. So this is from the page layout. I've cut this piece out. I've cut another piece out that's for the left page. I'll show you that shortly. And I've also cut out a title. Now this wasn't in the page layout for it, so you can mix and match things in. If you bring in the whole page layout, it comes in as an SVG. And I'll just bring in the catalogue so you can see. So this is the digital art collection for Hey Handsome. I've brought in this element here, which is going to be a photo strip holder. So that's that part there. And I've also brought in this background piece here for the right page, which I'll show you in a moment. So they're the only two elements that I'm using from this whole page layout. When you bring this in as an SVG, it comes in as one item. You can ungroup it and you can pick out the pieces you want to use. And then the I Love My Boys is this SVG here. So I'm combining that with this section. And also, I'll just move this. I've already done a little bit of adhering, so this gives you an idea of where this layout is going. This section here is actually the piece that is behind this element here, but I wanted to make a bit of a feature of it because I quite like these lines cut out from it. So I think it's really good to be able to pick pieces out of an SVG file that come all together. You can separate pieces from the cards as well. If you wanted to use this tie banner, you could put that onto a scrapbook layout. It really is quite versatile and easy to use and gives you so many more images than just these standalone SVG images here. You can pick all of these pieces out and use them as you wish. So the other things I'm going to use are the Hey Handsome scrapbooking stamp set. I've got one of my favorite stamp sets here, background elements, and I'm using Mist, Charcoal and Papaya as my inks. So I'm going to do a little bit of assembly on screen for you and show you the treatments. You can see I've already stamped some elements and I've fussy cut the cameras out because they don't have a thin cut. This title here, Premium Quality, that has a thin cut, so that was quite easy to cut out. And I always keep a little tray so that I can put all these elements in here so I don't lose the little pieces that go over top of letters or the pieces that I have fussy cut out. So I'm just going to put those off to the side and I'm going to assemble this I Love My Boys. So I'll just clear these bits off so I can put it down on some white cardstock so you can see. The SVG cuts a base layer, it cuts a top layer for boys, which you can do in a different color, and it also cuts a heart. But I wanted to add another layer as well. So I've used the offset feature so that I can have this backed onto white, and you can see that's going to stand out a little bit better when I put the other elements onto my page rather than just having this section here that might get a little bit lost with all the patterns. And now I need to get into the actual page construction. So I've got some strips of paper here, but what I want to do is ink the edges of this pattern paper. I'm going to use Papaya ink, and I'm just bringing in my blending tool. Now this I've got designated for Spiced Marmalade, which is a Distress Oxide ink, but I've swapped out the foam, and I've got a foam, the rounded foam, that I'm going to use just for this Papaya ink. I need to order myself some more handles because I'm the sort of person that likes having a handle for pretty much each colour family, but I don't like mixing the inks between Distress Oxides and water-based dye inks. I like to keep the foam parts separate from that. So I'm just going around the edges of this. This is a 3" by 12" piece, and the one for the right page is a 1" by 12" piece. So it doesn't take too long to distress the edges of that. If I had dragged it through my ink pad, I would get a cleaner line, but I wanted a softer line, which is why I'm using this tool. Then I'm going to bring in my dot roller. So I'm just going to turn my paper sideways because I want my pieces to run in this direction, but it's easier for me to line things up when they're at the bottom. So the first piece I'm going to put down is this 1/4" strip of the Papaya mixing with the star pattern, and using a dot roller over the top of an all-purpose mat means I don't have to worry about keeping the adhesive within that strip. The excess of the dot roller either goes onto the all-purpose mat or you just get it adhered to the actual strip itself, which means I don't have any mess. So I'm just lining this up on the edge. So that's the first 1/4" strip. And then I'm going to do the same for the harbour piece of mixing, which is also cut at 1/4 by 1/4 inch by 12 inches. And they're all just going up against each other. And then I can adhere this icon pattern paper, which is from the Hey Handsome pack. So this is just building up layers of paper to form a border. And I'm also going to use a strip of 2" by 12" papaya just to finish that off and to give an extended area and somewhere for my title to land. And now that I've done that, I'm just going to bring in my tool and go along the edges. There's a little bit of white on the edges here, but that's okay because I'm just going to go along with the papaya. Just need to load up my tool a little bit more and go along the edges here and finish off that edge. And then I'm going to go across the bottom as well. I didn't bother inking up these edges of the paper because they're quite fine. I just want the areas at the top and bottom of my border strips to have the distressing on them. I've gone ahead and I've adhered some photo placeholders to this element, and I also flipped it over and I just cut some little strips of papaya to adhere on the back side of this so that when I put this down, you could see the print coming through, especially on this star here. So I decided that they needed to have a little highlight and a little pop of papaya. And I was adhering these layers together. So if you remember, there was white, charcoal, and this is mist. And I've decided that the mist needs a little bit more of a treatment. So I'm not going to put this on just yet. I'm going to adhere this to the page first, and then I'm going to adhere my heart with foam tape because it'll be easier to put the dot roller over the back of this. But what I decided to do was cut another one of these boys, and I'm going to stamp on it because I think it's just a little bit flat with the cardstock and the cardstock here. So I want to make a feature of this boys, and this is where I'm bringing in my background elements. So I'm going to use this splatter one, and I'm going to do tone on tone stamping. So I'm bringing in mist. And I think this splatter will work quite well. So you can see that will give a little bit of texture to this lettering here. And I'm just going to go over top. I really love how this looks. I did a little test on a scrap piece of mist cardstock just to see if I liked the look of it. But I really think this is going to add quite a nice touch to this title. You can see how that lifts that already just by having a little bit of splatter on top of there from a stamp. If you don't like splattering with a shimmer brush or with ink or anything like that, this is a really good way to add a little bit of texture very easily. There's no drying time and it's just stamping on top. So I really like how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adhere these sections to my page. And I do have some more stamping that I want to do as well onto this page. I've gone ahead and I've adhered these elements. So this is about 1.5 inches from the top of the page. And then I've put this across so that it sits directly underneath the title. Now I've put some foam tape on this element here and I can just adhere this straight over the top of the heart. And I've brought in the right page just to show you the direction. So the borders on the edges are similar. This icon pattern paper is only 1 inch wide. These two pieces are the same as the left side, so they're 1/4 inch wide. I wanted to make this less of a border than the left page. I just felt like with these elements, it had to have the wider area for things to sit. And because on the right page, I've got this large photo mat here, I have left this area smaller. So you can see I've gone ahead and done some stamping on here. Now the other day I watched one of Julie Carrier's videos and she showed a really neat technique with this. So I've applied that stamping technique to this right page and I'm going to do it on the left page, and I'll put a link to her video below because I really loved how she applied the ink to the image. So I'm just going to bring in my scratch paper here. I'm going to use mist ink and a sponge dauber, and I've got the geometric type pattern from the stamp set. So you can see that's this design here. But I also need to bring in the right side of the layout. And what Julie did with her stamping, which I thought was absolutely fabulous, was instead of inking up and doing second generation, I do a lot of second generation and third generation stamping, but she's actually used a sponge dauber to apply the ink to the stamp, and this will give you a more textured look. So the ink won't necessarily have spread evenly all the way across, but that's the look I'm going for. And I also want to line this up so that it carries across to the left page. So because the blocks are see-through, I'm easily able to put that down there like that and stamp. And you can see it's not quite even the amount of ink that's on here. So it gives you a much more textured look. I'll just stamp straight on here so you can see how even and strong that is. And then if I do a second generation stamp, I've still got even applications of ink, but by using a sponge dauber, that's going to give you more texture to this. So the inks will dry. This one was stamped quite some time ago, so they will dry back to a different color, but that is the exact look I was going for. But I do love how this works with applying ink with a sponge dauber. So now I'm just going to do across the bottom as well, and this stamp makes things very easy to line on top. I've always start with the completed section at the top, or the area that I'm stamping first, so I can look through the block and just stamp down, and I love how that looks. So I'm going to keep doing that across to the edge, but I do want it to fade out when I get to about here. So I'm just going to bring in my paper towel and I'm going to have a little look, and I'm just going to sponge off some of that ink. I'm just going to grab something to mask off this edge, and then I can line this back up again. And I'm going to do the top section first. So I'm actually going to sponge a little bit more of that ink off because I want to line this up with this top element here. And then I can go straight down. And because I've taken some of the ink off with the paper towel, that bleeds it out just a little bit more. And then I can go in and do this bottom section. So I'm inking this up again with a sponge dauber. I'm going to take some of the ink away with my paper towel, mask this area off. I'm just using an old envelope, and line this back up. And now I'm going to do exactly the same thing across the top here. And on my left page, I've really only got one complete row and a little bit of the circles. So that's exactly the same type of stamping, just making sure that I ink up the top section of the stamp, and then I can come in with this area just showing just at the top edge. So I really love how that technique works. When I watched that video, I just thought how wonderful it was to be able to ink up our stamps and get a more textured look. So now what I'm going to do is bring in my pages and add some finishing touches with the embellishments and the things that I have already stamped. So you can see I've got everything in my tray here. I need to add these little sections here for the inside of the letters. If I had just left them on my desk, I would have lost them by now. So that's why I love having a little dish so that I can put those things on. I have this sort of subtitle element here, and I thought it would be cute to add that underneath this area of this large photo mat. But then I think I might tuck the premium quality up the top. So I'm just going to slice this off, and I can use this plastic guide here to help me get everything nice and straight. So having sliced that off, I'm going to be able to adhere this to the bottom section here. I can tuck a little bit of it under, or I can put it right up against this area. Then that sort of looks like that strip goes all the way through. So I think that will work really well. I'm going to look at these additional pieces that I've got. This I've actually fussy cut out. So the dies that come with this set are these three here, but the cameras are quite easy to fussy cut, as are the arrows, and I decided to fussy cut out this limited edition. All of this stamping is done with the mist ink, but then I've used mist, papaya and charcoal for these other elements. I think what I might do is put the papaya at the top and come down like this over here. I quite like how that looks. And to continue the grouping of cameras, I think what I might do is work out if I want to put a little group off here to the right of this title. It's getting a little bit busy, but what I'm thinking is that they will work better down in this bottom section over here, or actually with this limited edition. That will give the limited edition somewhere to live and make it look like everything belongs. And I'm choosing the colours that go because I've got papaya here. I don't want to have mist right up against this, so I think what I'll do is just have two little cameras coming out from this section and maybe put a camera here. Actually, I don't think I'm going to put that camera at all, because for the journaling, I want this to be list journaling. So I'm going to draw some lines and have reasons why I love my boys. So I can have numbers and then the list of the items. And if you want to do this page and cut this out with a Cricut, it's quite easy just to separate this off and just have I love my boy. So I could cut this off straight up here with this Y and straight across here with this Y, and that way I will just have I love my boy. So I would do that with scissors, so you don't have to use this title exactly as it's meant to be. So now I'm just trying to decide if I want to use these arrow elements. I could have them coming underneath the cameras here, and I could put an arrow across this heart. I think that's quite cute. Maybe in the mist. I'm not sure about the charcoal. So I'm just fussing with these to decide whether or not I have enough. And I think that might do it. So I'm going to adhere everything down. Just before I go, I wanted to show you how I've created this exact same layout with a more feminine feel using the Cosette paper pack. Now, all I have done is replaced the pattern papers with the Cosette papers. I've used the same mix-in pack. Instead of using the star element from the mix-in, I've flipped it over. So the star papaya pattern is on one side, and on the other is this soft floral type element, and it's got a wash through it. So it's not as strong with the papaya color, but it still blends quite well with the papaya star. I found when I cut the heart out with this, it was a little bit too soft, so I decided to use the star side. But I have used this paper to do the strips, and instead of using the harbour strip that was here in the Hey Handsome layout, I've used this pine one, which has the script. You still get, even though these are 1/4 inch strip pieces, you still get a sense of the pattern with it. You don't necessarily have to use a whole sheet of it to get the lovely texture and the feel with these prints. I've inked my edges of the pattern paper and around the edges here of the base layers with Desert Rose, and Desert Rose is the stamping that I've used. And I've also used Desert Rose in this strip, but the piece with Girls I've actually done with Peach. I've created this title myself in Design Space, so I'll put what font I've used because I couldn't exactly replicate the font that was within the SVG file. I picked one that was fairly close, but you will have to have Cricut Access to use this font. I've kept the same format with this title. Instead of using the dark side of charcoal, I've used the light side of charcoal, so that gives it a softer, more feminine feel. And the stamping across the top of the Peach is from the Dream Maker stamp set. So it's this text stamp here that I've used before, but it just gives a lovely, subtle, soft feel. And I've actually kept the Hey Handsome stamped elements. So I've used the cameras, I've used this same title, splitting it up, stamping it in Desert Rose. I've used, instead of using charcoal, I've used pewter instead. So this is pewter, Desert Rose and Peach stamping. I've stamped the arrows. The limited edition I have stamped in Peach. And the only stamping that is different between the two layouts is instead of doing the stars from the Hey Handsome card making kit, I've brought in the hearts from New Kid on the Block. So these little group of hearts here are stamped in Desert Rose, Peach and second generation pewter because it just gave a softer look to that heart. And I think this works quite well. If you haven't seen this stamp set before, it's actually in our core catalogue and it really is a great stamp set, not only for card making but also for a scrapbooking page with these word art pieces here, and also of course this cute little onesie which you can stamp and then put the rainbow on the inside. I just want to show you this. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but this rainbow isn't actually part of the onesie stamp set, so you can put that on later. You can put these little elements inside there as well. So it's just something I think that sometimes gets overlooked with the core catalogue, the stamp sets that are in there that are just totally flexible. I know that I buy them pretty much at the start of the catalogue and then I put them in my pile to work on later, but I think this is a must-have, especially when making little baby cards or baby pages. So back to this, I really love how this works and is a more feminine touch, even though I have used a Hey Handsome scrapbooking stamp set here, which primarily you would think masculine, but by bringing in different tones and different papers, I think these layouts have worked out really, really well. Thank you so much for hanging around to the end of this video so you could see both versions of these pages. As always, happy crafting. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.